Now we come to the disease diabetes that is so prevalent in the world and is increasing at such a rate that it's no exaggeration to call it a tsunami. Current estimates are that every 7 seconds a person dies from diabetes. Simply, it is a condition where the body is not making enough insulin, resulting in elevated blood glucose levels that can then result in damage to different body parts. The key organ here is the pancreas, and the cells that make insulin are the pancreatic beta cells. We don't understand why those cells in the pancreas fail. We know with ageing there's about a 0.5 to 1% loss of function in most cells in a person from their mid-20s. But most people developing diabetes lose function in those pancreatic beta cells at a rate of about 5% per year, a much quicker rate. Unfortunately, we don't have a specific intervention which can stop that loss of pancreatic beta cell function and loss of insulin production.
We need to begin by making it very clear that there are at least 2 different kinds of diabetes. There is the form called type 1 diabetes. It used to be called insulin-dependent diabetes. That type tends to occur mainly in younger children, is what is called an autoimmune disease. It is a disease where your immune system, which was designed to fight foreign invaders, makes some mistakes and start to recognize cells in your own body as being foreign and kills them. In the case of type 1 diabetes, those cells that are killed are the ones in the pancreas that manufacture insulin. It is a genetic disease, but there may also be an environmental trigger. There is evidence that a viral infection might trigger a mistaken autoimmune response. Back in the early 1900s, this was a life-threatening disease. You would starve to death because you could not get glucose into your cells without insulin. One of the most important discoveries was that of insulin, and overnight, it saved millions of lives. We now have people who have been living healthy, happy lives for 60 to 17 years while taking insulin every day. And molecular biology has improved things. Previously, insulin came from cows and pigs, but nowadays you can make insulin in bacteria, and it's just like going into grocery stores. So it is a real marvel of modern science. The second type of diabetes, which is more common, is type 2 diabetes. In fact, the ratio of type 2 to type 1 diabetes is 10 to 1. Type 2 diabetes used to be called mature onset diabetes because it only happens in older people. But with increasing westernization, there is a tidal wave of people getting fatter younger. Now doctors are seeing teenage kids in their clinic with type 2 diabetes, and this was unheard of 20 years ago. Type 2 diabetes can also be genetic, but it has a very important link to environment. And the greatest risk factor for type 2 diabetes is obesity. It is like saying if you are a smoker and you've got a certain kind of genes that might cause defect in your lungs, you are in big trouble. We know a lot of smokers who live to 102, and that's because they don't have the gene. Similarly, lots of people are obese and don't get type 2 diabetes, but there are those who have certain genes, and if they become obese, they are in big trouble. So why is obesity such a high risk factor for diabetes? With the advent of multicellular organisms, one of the cells that evolved was the adipocytes. The adipocyte was like a bank, as it enables organisms to store nutrients and fat. The problem with storing fat is if it gets into other cells in your body, your liver or pancreas, it has toxic effect and wreaks havoc. So a function of adipose tissue is not only to act as a reserve, but to sequester fat, to shield it from causing harm. The problem is it is a limited source and can only deal with so many fat cells. So as people become obese, the fat starts leaking out of the fat cells into other places, and that's where the harm starts to occur. Not everyone who has diabetes is obese. It depends whether the fat is stored. Premenopausal women store their fat in the subcutaneous fat, such as the buttocks and thighs. But men preferentially store fat in the abdominal space, and that is a much greater risk for diabetes than the subcutaneous space. Premenopausal women have a lower risk of diabetes than men, but after menopause, they lose the advantage because the fat starts to accumulate in the abdominal space. Certain groups have a predisposition to store fat just in their abdominal space, so you can look at them and think they don't look obese, but actually they are.